Hi everybody, it's Liz here with some feedback for your Week 2 Wiki, which was asking you to think about how a particular unit of work for English was designed and the principles that were behind it. So as I did in Week 1, I'm just going to go through some of the responses and pull out the important points. So the first question asks what inquiry means within the context of the Australian curriculum. Now, Alyssa, you point out quite rightly that it's about students conducting their own investigations and doing their own research, taking responsibility for the research. So asking questions and students using research skills to answer those questions. Perry, I like the way you've identified the steps that are involved in an inquiry based approach. So about posing the questions, locating and analysing sources, developing an explanation. Ashley and Jessica, you both identified that inquiry when you were looking at the Australian curriculum was more prevalent in other learning areas like history and geography. Now, though it's more explicitly taught in those subjects, inquiry is more explicit in those subjects. So you're right in that sense. However, we can look at the general capabilities of the Australian curriculum. And within critical and creative thinking, there's a section that does address the idea of inquiry. Now, it's only small, and we could argue that there should be a greater focus on that within English. But there is some information here about inquiry being part of a general capability. So remember, those are the things that ACARA have said that students should be learning no matter what learning area they're in. So across any subject, they should be learning critical and creative thinking. So under that, they've suggested that inquiry is part of that. Okay, so developing thinking and discussion skills. Okay, let's go back and look at question 2. What does critical literacy mean? Okay, so this response is on the mark. It's about understanding how certain words and constructions in a text are used to persuade readers and convey messages. And then there are questions that we ask of students about the purpose of the text, the motivations of the writer of the text. So it's about, how am I being positioned to think about whatever the topic of that text is. Holly, I like that you identified the 4-resource model in talking about this. Okay, so remember Luke and Freebody's 4-resource model. So asking what sort of text is this? Why does it exist? What's its purpose? What does it mean? And so on. I'm just going to read a really short excerpt from a chapter in a textbook called Reviewing English by Wayne Sawyer and Eva Gold. It's in a chapter by Wendy Morgan. Sorry, I just lost my page. There we go. Okay, so it says that critical literacy teaching begins by problematizing the cultures and knowledges of the text, putting them up for grabs for critical debate, for weighing, judging, critiquing. And then it says in the classroom that we need to be talking about how and in whose interests social institutions and texts can refract and bend social and natural reality, manipulate and position readers and writers. So it's about, as it started off with, problematizing particularly dominant ways of thinking about the world. There's certainly a focus on the idea of power and who has the power, what kind of power are the developers of texts exerting when they publish their texts. So it's about thinking about who made the text, what's their purpose, how are they trying to make me feel about this text, or what do they want me to think, what attitudes, values, beliefs is this text trying to impose on me? Critical literacy has become quite a significant part of English teaching right from the early year levels. The senior years, year 11 and 12, probably have the heaviest focus, and there's some more complex work going on, but it is being taught earlier and earlier, which I think is an important thing. Okay, question 3 asks us to think about persuasive devices and what that's actually referring to. Okay. So Martha's listed some examples, so things like rhetoric, emotive appeals, arguments, repetition, all those kinds of strategies. So have a little read of those ones. Holly, you've identified some. Okay, this framework here is something that, using these 3, ethos and so on, those are taught in the Year 8 curriculum at the moment, actually. So that's a really well-rounded way of looking at persuasion. So keep that one in mind. We can keep in mind that the types of persuasive devices that are used will depend on the text type. So in this unit of work, when we're looking at advertising, in the past I've taught things like composition of the, well, this is for print advertising, composition of the ad, body language, colour, the written text, whether it uses alliteration, metaphors, any appeals to emotions. And then in Year 10 units that I taught about documentaries, I taught things like whose point of view it was told from, any camera techniques that were used, the music, and how all of those things were positioning the viewers to think about the topic. Okay, the next question. Does this unit sound interesting to you? Well, overwhelmingly, I've skipped a couple of questions. I'll just do that one and then come back to it, to the other ones. Yes, the overwhelming response was yes. You thought that it was an interesting sounding unit. Ashley and Alyssa, you both said that it is because it's necessary for the real world. These are things that are definitely applicable to our students' lives. So there's a real world sense about it, which is great to sell the unit to our students. And Perry, I like that you've identified that you have some background in advertising. So I think that as a teacher, you'll bring a really well-rounded perspective to your classroom. Okay, sorry, I'll put back to the questions that I skipped for whatever reason. Question 4. What might critical and creative work involve? So Flora. Okay, Flora's got the right idea here. Let's have a read of that. So about the layers of meaning in the different contexts. And it's going to depend on the purpose for the text. And whether you might want to reveal or foreground different points of view. So we're always keeping in mind the purpose of what we're critiquing or what we're creating. But yeah, it can be things like revealing marginalised perspectives or telling stories from a different angle, transforming the text type, all sorts of things like that. Okay, does this, yeah, we've done 5. Okay, how many sequences does it involve? Yes, 12, ranging from 12 to 16. But that will depend on the pathway that you choose. So that will depend on your students, you know, what their needs are. And it could also depend in a school on things like how many lessons you're losing. Is there a swimming carnival on? Is there a student-free day? All those kinds of things. So keeping that in mind when you're planning your lessons, that you'll lose lessons It happens all the time, particularly at the start of the year. There's time lost for school photos and lots, swimming carnivals are often at the start of the year. Then you might lose a class for immunisations, special presentations. So it does happen quite a lot, so be prepared for that. Okay, and the last question, what might a sequence mean? Jessica, you've said that it's about a logical progression through the content. So it's about designing your unit of work in a sequence, so building from the basics to the more complex skills through to the assessment. Martha, I like that you've identified that we need to allow for opportunities for formative assessment and reflection along the way. That's so important. I know that I've said before, I'll just say it again, how important feedback is. That's one of the best and most significant things that we can do to improve student results, giving them feedback along the way. Don't let them get to the assessment task and then let them find out that they don't know what they're doing. Let them know along the way how they're going with the individual skills that they're building on in order to complete their assessment task. And lastly, Michelle, you've got in here about scaffolding. So scaffolding the learning so that students do have the opportunity to succeed. And so this comes into play when we're ordering our units of work, making sure that we're building on previous knowledge. So making sure that we don't jump ahead and try and present something to students that they're just not quite ready for. They need a little bit more work on their foundation understanding of the unit before they can progress. All right, that's all. Thank you.